The fluorescent lights of the warehouse floor flickered above me as I stood there, 16 hours deep into what should have been an 8-hour shift. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion and the burning anger rising in my chest. I said, "Get back on that floor, Lockwood." Braxton Sheffield's voice echoed across the loading dock, his face red with the kind of rage that comes from someone who's never been told no. "I don't care if you've been here since 4 this morning. We have a deadline." I looked at my watch. It was 8:47 p.m. My vision had started blurring an hour ago. The safety checklist I'd been reviewing swam before my eyes, the words doubling and tripling. "Braxton, I physically cannot continue. This violates every labor law and safety protocol we have. I'm a danger to myself and everyone on this floor right now." His laugh was sharp, cruel. "Safety protocols? You think Zenith Logistics became an industry leader by crying about safety protocols? Turn in your badge. You're done. You're a waste of money, Lockwood, a complete waste." The badge felt heavy in my hand as I unclipped it from my belt. 16 hours. 16 consecutive hours I'd given to this company, to this project, to making sure everything was done right. And this was how it ended. 1 week later, Braxton's best project, the one he'd screamed at me to sacrifice my health for, collapsed spectacularly. The entire shipment was canceled. Millions of dollars evaporated. And suddenly, my name was on everyone's lips again. But not the way Braxton wanted. Stories like these, stories of workplace injustice, of standing your ground, and of the sweet, inevitable reckoning that follows. Well, they're exactly why this space exists. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where the truth about toxic workplaces and the people who survive them gets told. If stories of workplace justice speak to you, hitting that subscribe button helps build this community. We're on our way to 7,000 subscribers, and every single person who joins makes that goal real. It's a simple click, but it means this content reaches others who need to hear it. My name is Sabrina Lockwood, and for 6 years, I served as Senior Operations Coordinator at Zenith Logistics Northeastern Distribution Hub. I grew up in a household where my mother cleaned offices at night and my father drove long-haul trucks. The kind of upbringing that teaches you the value of every working person in the chain. That background never left me. It shaped how I saw people, how I led teams, and why I could never stomach watching workers get crushed under unreasonable demands. That understanding was about to become both my greatest strength and the reason I'd lose everything. The trouble started 3 months before that final confrontation, though I didn't recognize the warning signs at first. Zenith Logistics had just landed the Cardinal account, a pharmaceutical distribution contract worth $42 million over 3 years. It was the kind of deal that made executive bonuses fat and sent middle managers into a frenzy of empire building. Our Northeastern hub was chosen as the primary distribution point, which meant our facility would be ground zero for implementation. That's when Braxton Sheffield arrived. He transferred in from the Atlanta facility with a reputation that preceded him like a storm front. The efficiency executioner, they called him, though never to his face. He'd supposedly cut operational costs by 30% in Atlanta, though nobody seemed to want to talk about the turnover rate he'd left in his wake or the 3 lawsuits quietly settled by corporate. I first met Braxton on a Tuesday morning in late March. The Northeastern hub occupied a massive converted textile mill on the outskirts of Philadelphia, all red brick and industrial bones retrofitted with state-of-the-art logistics technology. My office was a glass-walled box overlooking the main floor, where I could watch the orchestrated chaos of dozens of workers moving packages, checking manifests, and keeping the arteries of American commerce flowing. Braxton appeared at my door without knocking, already talking. "Sabrina Lockwood, Braxton Sheffield, I'm taking over as operations director. First thing, I need you to explain to me why your cost per package metrics are 7% above the national Zenith average." No greeting, no introduction beyond his name, just an immediate attack disguised as a question. I stood, extending my hand. He glanced at it for a half-second before sitting in one of my visitor chairs uninvited. "Our costs run slightly higher because we prioritize accuracy and safety," I said, lowering my ignored hand. This region handles pharmaceutical distribution, medical equipment, and temperature-sensitive materials. An error here doesn't just mean a missed delivery. It can mean a hospital doesn't get critical medication. Interesting excuse, Braxton said, scrolling through his tablet. What I hear is, we spend more money to do the same job everyone else does cheaper. That's not what Here's what's going to happen, Lockwood. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes had the flat quality of someone running calculations rather than having a conversation. The Cardinal account launches in 8 weeks. Corporate has made very clear that this implementation needs to be flawless and under budget. I'm cutting your operational costs by 20% before launch. I don't care how you do it. Fewer overtime hours, reduced safety inspections, cheaper materials. Just make it happen. 20%? Braxton, that's not realistic. We can't. Can't? His eyebrows rose. I don't recall asking if you could. I'm telling you that you will, unless you'd prefer I find someone who can. The threat hung in the air between us, as subtle as a sledgehammer. I'll review the numbers, I said carefully, but I won't compromise safety protocols. That's non-negotiable. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Everything's negotiable, Sabrina. You'll learn that. He left my office, and I sat back down slowly, my mind already racing through the impossible math he'd just dumped on my desk. 20%, 8 weeks, no safety compromises. Something had to break. I just didn't realize yet that it would be me. The next 2 weeks revealed Braxton's management philosophy in excruciating detail. He held meetings at 6:30 a.m., before most people's shifts started, and again at 6 p.m., ensuring that salaried staff effectively worked 12-hour days. He implemented a streamlined reporting structure that eliminated 2 supervisor positions and redistributed their responsibilities across remaining staff. He renegotiated our equipment maintenance contracts, switching from our reliable local provider to a national chain that charged less, but took 3 times longer to respond to service calls. Every change came with the same justification: efficiency. But I'd been in logistics long enough to know the difference between efficiency and corner cutting. Real efficiency comes from optimizing processes, investing in good training, and maintaining equipment before it breaks. What Braxton was doing was just stripping away anything that didn't immediately produce visible output, like removing the oil from an engine, because it's not directly connected to the wheels. The real conflict began on a Thursday afternoon, 4 weeks before the Cardinal launch. I was reviewing the preliminary operational plan for the Cardinal account when I saw it, the proposed shift schedules. Braxton had created a flexible rotation that would have warehouse staff working 10-hour minimum shifts with the possibility of voluntary extensions, up to 14 hours during peak periods. Voluntary, right. I grabbed my printed copy and headed straight for his office, the large corner office that used to belong to our previous director, a woman named Lillian Ashworth, who'd run the facility for 12 years before taking early retirement suspiciously soon after Braxton's arrival. These shift schedules violate our fatigue management policy, I said, dropping the document on his desk. We have mandatory rest periods specifically because warehouse work is physically demanding and dangerous when people are exhausted. Braxton didn't look up from his computer. The fatigue management policy is a guideline, not a rule, and I've already cleared these schedules with legal. Legal cleared 14-hour shifts for warehouse workers. Legal cleared voluntary extended shifts for workers who want to earn extra pay. If people choose to work longer, that's their decision. Braxton, you and I both know there's no such thing as truly voluntary when someone's worried about being seen as not a team player. People will destroy their health because they're afraid of being labeled weak. He finally looked at me. Is there a question in all of this, Sabrina? Because I'm very busy. The question is whether you're genuinely willing to risk worker safety and facility compliance for the sake of your cost-cutting targets. The answer is that I'm willing to do what's necessary to meet the objectives corporate has given me. If you're not comfortable with that, I'm happy to discuss a transition plan for your role. There it was again, the threat, the implication that raising concerns was a career-limiting move. I should have pushed harder. I should have gone over his head right then. But I didn't. Instead, I told myself I'd document everything, build a paper trail, and prove through results that his approach was unsustainable. That was my first mistake. The Cardinal account officially launched on May 15th. A bright Tuesday morning that started with an all-hands meeting where Braxton gave a speech about excellence, efficiency, and the Zenith way. He thanked the team for their hard work he'd systematically made harder through his policies, and unveiled a banner reading, Cardinal Excellence, setting the standard. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The first week went smoothly, mostly because everyone was running on adrenaline and determination. The second week, cracks started showing. A forklift broke down and took 36 hours to repair instead of the usual 8. 2 workers called in sick with back injuries from the extended shifts. A shipment of temperature-sensitive medication sat on the dock for 3 hours because the worker responsible for cold chain verification had been reassigned to another task. I caught that last one myself during a floor inspection, nearly had a heart attack, and immediately moved the shipment to proper cold storage. Then I filed an incident report, sent it to Braxton, and waited. His response came via email 20 minutes later. Incident noted. No product damage occurred. Moving forward, coordinate cold chain tasks more efficiently to prevent delays. He'd completely missed the point. Or more likely, he deliberately ignored it. The issue wasn't coordination. It was that we didn't have enough properly trained people covering essential safety tasks because he'd cut positions. I called a meeting with my remaining supervisors. Andrew Garrett, a 20-year Zenith veteran who ran our receiving department, and Holly Brennan, who managed outbound shipping. "It's getting dangerous out there," Andrew said, rubbing his weathered face. "I've got workers who have been here since 5 a.m. asking me if they're allowed to go home at 6 p.m. after their shifts end. They're scared to leave because Braxton keeps talking about commitment to excellence and who's willing to go the extra mile." Holly nodded. "I've got the same issue, and the quality checks are suffering. When people are exhausted, they make mistakes. We've had 3 misships this week. 3. We usually average 3 per month." "Document everything," I told them. "Every incident, every near miss, every safety concern. Date, time, witnesses. If this goes south, we need records showing we raised alarms." "You think it's going to go that bad?" Holly asked. I thought about Braxton's dead eyes, his contempt for safety concerns, his single-minded focus on metrics that looked good in PowerPoint presentations but meant nothing on an actual warehouse floor. "Yeah," I said, "I think it's going to go that bad." I was wrong, it went worse. The crisis point arrived on June 7th, 3 weeks into the Cardinal account operation. I'd come in at 4 a.m. that morning, because we had a major pharmaceutical shipment arriving at 5 a.m. that needed immediate processing and distribution to 17 hospitals across the northeastern corridor. This was exactly the kind of high-stakes, time-sensitive operation that Zenith had been hired to handle flawlessly. The shipment arrived on schedule. The processing did not go on schedule. Our automated sorting system, the one Braxton had switched to a cheaper maintenance contract, first started malfunctioning around 6:30 a.m. Packages were being misdirected, labels were printing incorrectly, and the whole flow of the operation ground to a crawl. I immediately called the maintenance provider. They said they'd have someone there by end of business day. "This is a pharmaceutical shipment for hospitals," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "End of business day means patients don't get medication. We need someone now." "Ma'am, all our technicians are assigned. You're in the queue. We'll get there as soon as possible." I hung up and immediately called our old maintenance provider, the local company that actually understood the urgency of logistics operations. They said they could have someone there in 90 minutes, but since we weren't currently under contract, it would cost triple the usual emergency rate. I didn't hesitate, I approved it. Then I went to find Braxton to inform him of the decision and the cost. He was in his office, on a video call with someone at corporate, laughing about something. I waited outside until he finished. When he emerged, I explained the situation quickly and clearly. His face went through several colors, before settling on an aggressive shade of red. You approved what? Emergency maintenance at premium rates. The alternative was delaying a critical pharmaceutical shipment by 12 hours minimum. The alternative was waiting for our contracted provider and eating the delay cost, which would have been less than what you just spent. Braxton, this shipment includes time-sensitive medications for 17 hospitals. The delay cost would be our reputation and possibly our contract. I made the call that protected the client and the business. You made a call that wasn't yours to make. He stepped closer, voice rising. I'm the operations director. Expenditures above standard rates require my approval. You just blew our monthly maintenance budget on one service call. Would you rather I let the shipment fail? I'd rather you remember your place in the chain of command. Other workers had started glancing our way. We were providing a show neither of us wanted to be in. This conversation should happen in private, I said quietly. This conversation is over. You're officially on notice, Lockwood. One more unauthorized decision like that, and you're gone. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my hands clenched. Andrew appeared at my elbow. That was ugly. That was necessary, I said, and I'd do it again. The maintenance tech from our old provider arrived in 87 minutes and had the system running again within an hour. The pharmaceutical shipment went out with minimal delay. I received a personal email from the Cardinal account manager, thanking Zenith for the quick recovery and professional handling of the situation. I forwarded it to Braxton. He didn't respond. But the tension between us had gone from simmering to boiling. Everyone in the facility could feel it. And I knew, the way you know a storm's coming by the pressure in the air, that this was leading somewhere dark. The breaking point came exactly 2 weeks later, on June 21st. We were in the middle of a massive shipment consolidation for the Cardinal account. Multiple inbound deliveries that needed to be sorted, verified, and redistributed within a tight timeline. It was complex, but manageable with proper staffing and reasonable hours. Braxton had other ideas. He'd scheduled a skeleton crew for an operation that needed full staffing, apparently having decided that we were overstaffed during high-efficiency operations. His exact words. I came in at 4 a.m. because I'd seen the schedule and knew it was going to be chaos. I was right. By 8 a.m., we were behind schedule. By noon, we were critically behind. By 4 p.m., when my shift should have ended, we were in crisis mode, and Braxton was storming around the floor demanding everyone pick up the pace and show some commitment. I kept working, so did everyone else. What choice did we have? The shipment had to go out. By 6 p.m., I'd been on my feet for 14 hours. My back ached. My vision was getting fuzzy at the edges. I'd stopped for bathroom breaks and water, but I hadn't eaten since a granola bar at 3 a.m. By 8 p.m., 16 hours into my shift, I was reviewing safety checklists for the final outbound trucks and realized I'd read the same line 4 times without processing it. That's when I knew I had to stop. I found Braxton on the loading dock, screaming at a truck driver about departure times. Braxton, I need to talk to you. He whirled on me. Unless it's about getting these trucks out the door, I don't want to hear it. I've been here for 16 hours. I'm not safe to continue working. I need to clock out. The look on his face was pure contempt. We have a deadline, Lockwood. Everyone else is pulling their weight. I need you on the floor. I physically cannot continue safely. This violates every labor law and safety protocol we have. Safety protocols. You think Zenith Logistics became an industry leader by crying about safety protocols. I think Zenith became successful by delivering reliably and safely. Right now, I'm a danger to myself and everyone on this floor. I'm done. His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. If you walk off this floor right now, you're done at Zenith, period. Are you seriously threatening to fire me for refusing to work in a legal shift length? I'm telling you that if you're not committed to this team's success, there's no place for you here. Turn in your badge. You're a waste of money, Lockwood, a complete waste. The security office felt surreal at 8:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the silence too heavy. I handed my badge to the night security guard, a quiet man named Timothy who'd always been friendly during my 6 years at the facility. "Miss Lockwood," he looked confused. "What's going on?" "I've been terminated," I said, and hearing the words out loud made them real in a way they hadn't been during the confrontation. "Effective immediately." "That doesn't seem right. Should I call?" "It's fine, Timothy. Just take care of yourself, okay? Don't let them grind you down." I walked out to my car in the darkness, my entire body shaking, from exhaustion, from anger, from the shock of sudden unemployment. I'd given 6 years to Zenith. I'd built systems, mentored staff, maintained a safety record that was the envy of the region. And it ended because I refused to destroy my health for a man who measured success in cost-per-package metrics. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. Then I went home, walked straight to my bedroom, and slept for 12 hours. When I woke up the next morning, the reality settled in fully. I was unemployed. My health insurance would end in 30 days. I'd been fired, which meant explaining the termination in every future job interview. But underneath the panic, there was something else: rage. Clear, cold, focused rage at the injustice of it, at Braxton's casual cruelty, at a system that let people like him destroy workers and call it efficiency. I spent that first day doing what I should have done weeks earlier. I compiled documentation. Every email I'd sent raising safety concerns, every incident report, every schedule that violated fatigue management policies, the maintenance debacle, the cost-cutting measures that had compromised operations. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Simone Hartley, and she specialized in employment law. I'd found her through a recommendation from my cousin, who worked in HR at a different company. "Walk me through the termination," Simone said after I'd given her the overview. I detailed the entire June 21st shift, the 16 hours, the safety concerns I'd raised, Braxton's ultimatum, the firing. "And you have documentation of your hours?" "I have my timecard login records. They're digital." "Good. And the safety concerns you raised about the extended shifts?" "Email records, incident reports, meeting notes." Simone was quiet for a moment. "Sabrina, what you're describing is potentially a wrongful termination case with additional labor law violations. The challenge is that Zenith will have corporate lawyers and deep pockets. These cases can be expensive and lengthy." "I don't care about expensive or lengthy. I care about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to everyone else still working there." "Then let's build your case." I spent the next 3 days working with Simone, organizing documentation, writing detailed timelines, and preparing a formal complaint to both Zenith's corporate headquarters and the Department of Labor. On the 4th day after my termination, June 25th, Holly Brennan called me. "Sabrina, everything's falling apart." "Holly, what's happening?" "After you left, Braxton brought in someone from the Atlanta facility to replace you, a guy named Russell Montgomery, who's basically Braxton's clone. They've doubled down on the cost-cutting, and it's chaos. We've had 2 more equipment failures, 4 workers called out with injuries, and yesterday we had a near miss where a forklift almost hit someone because the operator had been working for 12 hours straight and didn't see him. Has anyone filed incident reports?" "Russell's been rejecting them. Says we're over-reporting minor issues and it's affecting our performance metrics." My hands clenched around the phone. "Holly, you need to document everything. Personal records not in the company system, dates, times, witnesses. If anyone gets seriously hurt, those records could save lives." "I'm trying, but Sabrina, I don't know how much longer I can stay here. It's not the company I signed up for anymore." "Do what you need to do to protect yourself. And Holly, if you need a reference or want to talk about what I'm doing legally, call me anytime." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, that cold rage burning brighter. This was the thing about people like Braxton. They never stopped with one victim. They were sharks who kept moving, kept attacking, kept destroying until someone stopped them. I intended to be that someone. Over the next week, Simone and I finalized the documentation and filed formal complaints. The wrongful termination lawsuit against Zenith was submitted on July 2nd. The Department of Labor complaint followed 2 days later. I also did something else. I reached out to every contact I had in the logistics industry and started quietly asking if anyone had experienced similar issues with Braxton Sheffield at his previous positions. What I found was illuminating and infuriating. Atlanta wasn't Braxton's first disaster. It was just the most recent one that corporate had covered up. Before Atlanta, he'd been at a facility in Memphis where 3 workers had been hospitalized for exhaustion-related injuries during his tenure. Before Memphis, he'd been in Phoenix, where a wrongful termination lawsuit had been quietly settled out of court. Braxton Sheffield had left a trail of broken workers and buried complaints across the country. And Zenith kept promoting him because his quarterly numbers looked good in executive presentations. I compiled all of it, every piece of information, every connection, every pattern. And then I waited. The call came on July 11th, exactly 3 weeks after my termination. It was Andrew Garrett, and his voice was shaking. "Sabrina, Cardinal pulled the contract." My heart stopped. "What?" "They canceled the entire contract, all $42 million over 3 years, gone." "What happened?" Andrew took a shaky breath. "Yesterday, we had a major shipment of cancer medications, time-sensitive, temperature-controlled, going to pediatric oncology units across the region. The shipment sat on our dock for 6 hours in 90-degree heat because we had a refrigeration unit failure and couldn't get maintenance here fast enough. By the time it was discovered, the entire shipment was compromised. Unusable. Had to be destroyed." My stomach turned. Were any patients affected? No, thank God. The hospitals had enough supply to cover the gap. But Cardinal did an immediate audit of our facility and found dozens of safety violations, incomplete documentation, and evidence of systematic corner cutting. They terminated the contract this morning, effective immediately. "Where's Braxton?" "In his office with corporate on the phone. There's talk of him being suspended pending investigation. Russell's already been reassigned. The whole thing is imploding, Sabrina." After Andrew hung up, I sat in my apartment, processing what I just heard. $42 million. Gone, because a man who called me a waste of money couldn't be bothered to maintain basic safety standards. And the worst part, I'd warned him. I'd told him exactly what would happen if he kept cutting corners. I'd documented it all. My phone rang again. This time it was Simone. "Sabrina, I just got a call from Zenith's corporate counsel. They want to meet." The meeting took place at Zenith's corporate headquarters in Manhattan, 3 days after the Cardinal contract cancellation. Simone had advised me carefully about what to expect, what to say, and what not to agree to without her explicit approval. We sat in a conference room on the 32nd floor, windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, leather chairs around a table that probably cost more than my annual salary had been. Across from us sat 3 people. Howard Brenner, Zenith's general counsel, Diane Kwon, VP of Operations, and an older woman who introduced herself as Margaret Ashford, Chief Operating Officer. Margaret spoke first. "Miss Lockwood, thank you for coming. I understand you filed both a wrongful termination lawsuit and a Department of Labor complaint against Zenith Logistics." "That's correct," I said evenly. "I've spent the past 72 hours reviewing the situation at our Philadelphia facility, including the circumstances of your termination. I've also reviewed the documentation you provided in your filings." She paused. "I want to be direct with you. What happened at that facility represents a systemic failure of oversight and management that is unacceptable. The loss of the Cardinal contract is just the beginning of the consequences we're facing." Howard leaned forward. "Miss Lockwood, we're prepared to offer a settlement that includes full reinstatement to your position, back pay for all lost wages, a formal apology, and a guarantee that Braxton Sheffield will no longer be employed by Zenith in any capacity." I glanced at Simone. She gave me a small nod. This was my call. "What about everyone else?" I asked. Diane looked confused. "I'm sorry." "What about the workers who were injured under Braxton's policies? What about the supervisors who raised concerns and were ignored? What about the systemic issues that allowed someone like Braxton to operate unchecked across multiple facilities for years? The three executives exchanged glances. We're conducting a comprehensive review of our operational oversight processes, Margaret said carefully. But our offer today is specific to your situation and your complaints. Then my answer is no. Howard's eyes widened. Miss Lockwood, I don't think you understand. We're offering you everything your lawsuit asked for plus a confidentiality agreement that prevents me from talking about any of this, correct? Silence. You want to make this go away quietly, I continued. Give me money, get me to sign an NDA, and continue operating the same way that enabled Braxton in the first place. The answer is no. Sabrina, Simone said quietly, can we take a moment? We stepped outside the conference room. Simone looked at me seriously. That was a very generous offer. If we go to trial, there's no guarantee we win, and even if we do, it could take years. I know, but if I take that settlement, nothing changes. Braxton gets quietly fired, they promote another Braxton clone somewhere else, and workers keep getting hurt. I didn't file these complaints just for me. Simone studied my face. You're sure? I'm sure. We went back inside. I sat down and looked directly at Margaret Ashford. Here's my counteroffer. Full reinstatement with back pay and a promotion to Regional Operations Director, the position overseeing Braxton. A company-wide audit of all facilities where Braxton worked, with remediation for any violations found. Compensation for workers who were injured or constructively discharged due to his policies. And a commitment to implementing industry-standard fatigue management and safety protocols across all Zenith facilities, with regular third-party audits. And in exchange, Margaret asked, I drop the lawsuit and work with your team to rebuild the Philadelphia facility and restore the Cardinal contract, if that's even possible at this point. But there's no NDA. I don't talk to the press about this, but I don't sign away my right to speak if asked directly. Howard looked like he wanted to argue. Diane looked skeptical, but Margaret Ashford looked thoughtful. Give us 24 hours, she said. Simone and I left the building. On the street, she turned to me. That was either brilliant or career suicide. We'll find out which tomorrow. The call came at 10 a.m. the next morning. Margaret Ashford herself, not a lawyer. Miss Lockwood, we accept your terms, all of them. When can you start? I started back at Zenith on July 20th, exactly 1 month after my termination. But I didn't start at the Philadelphia facility. I started at corporate headquarters, working directly with Margaret Ashford's team on the company-wide operational review. We audited all 4 facilities where Braxton had worked. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. Systematic safety violations, unreported injuries, falsified documentation, and a culture of fear that prioritized metrics over people. We spent 3 months cleaning house. 12 managers were terminated. 47 workers received compensation for injuries or hostile work conditions. Every facility underwent mandatory retraining on safety protocols and labor law compliance. The Cardinal contract was permanently lost. That bridge had been burned too thoroughly to rebuild. But the work we did caught the attention of other potential clients who'd been concerned about Zenith's safety record. By October, we'd landed 2 new contracts that, combined, exceeded the Cardinal value. Braxton Sheffield was terminated on July 15th, 5 days before I started back. I heard through industry contacts that he'd tried to land another logistics position, but found that his reputation had finally caught up with him. The network of people he'd harmed over the years had started comparing notes, and word spread quickly. The last I heard, he was working in an entirely different industry. Good riddance. I returned to the Philadelphia facility in November as Regional Operations Director, overseeing not just that location, but 3 others in the Northeastern Corridor. Holly Brennan got promoted to Operations Director at Philadelphia. Andrew Garrett became her second in command. On my first day back in the building, Timothy, the security guard, smiled when he saw me. Welcome back, Miss Lockwood. Good to have you here. Good to be back, Timothy. I walked through the facility. The same converted textile mill where I'd spent 6 years building systems and relationships, where I'd fought losing battles against impossible demands, where I'd finally hit my breaking point and walked away. Except I hadn't walked away. I'd been thrown out. And I'd fought my way back, not just for myself, but for every person who'd been ground down by a system that valued efficiency over humanity. The warehouse floor hummed with activity, organized, safe, sustainable activity. Workers moved with purpose but not panic. Equipment ran smoothly because we'd restored proper maintenance contracts. Shift schedules respected human limitations, rather than pretending people were machines. It wasn't perfect, no workplace is, but it was better, demonstrably, measurably better. And that night, when I left at the end of a reasonable shift, I drove home with something I hadn't felt in months: satisfaction. Not satisfaction from revenge, though there was admittedly something sweet about Braxton's downfall, but satisfaction from knowing that sometimes standing your ground actually works. Sometimes refusing to be broken actually leads to change. Sometimes the system does bend toward justice. You just have to be willing to push it there yourself. The real work began after the dramatic confrontations ended. Rebuilding trust in a facility that had been traumatized by months of Braxton's management required more than policy changes and new leadership. It required consistent, visible proof that things had genuinely changed. I started by doing something simple: listening. In my first month as Regional Operations Director, I scheduled one-on-one conversations with every supervisor and team lead in the Philadelphia facility, 37 conversations over 4 weeks. I asked the same questions in each one. What's working? What's not? What do you need to do your job better? What would you change if you had the authority? The answers were illuminating. From Jackson Hayes, our night shift supervisor: "We need better lighting in the northwest section. Half the overhead fixtures have been out for weeks, and people are working in shadows. It's dangerous, but we kept getting told maintenance was budgeted for next quarter." From Alicia Torres, who managed our medical supply logistics: "The inventory software crashes every time we try to run a full audit. We've been doing manual counts for 2 months, which triples our workload." It kept saying it was user error, but it's clearly a system problem. From Kevin Ortiz, our equipment maintenance coordinator: "We need to bring back our monthly equipment reviews. Braxton eliminated them to reduce downtime, but now we're having 3 times as many emergency repairs because we're not catching problems early." Each conversation revealed another small wound that had festered during Braxton's tenure. Problems that seemed minor individually, but collectively created an environment of frustration and disengagement. I fixed the lighting in the northwest section within a week. I brought in a new IT vendor to overhaul the inventory software. I reinstated monthly equipment reviews and hired 2 additional maintenance staff to ensure we could do preventive work instead of just emergency repairs. Small victories. But in a workplace that had been gaslit into believing their concerns didn't matter, small victories rebuilt trust faster than grand gestures. The harder work was cultural. Braxton had created an environment where people were afraid to raise concerns because doing so marked you as not a team player or resistant to change. That fear didn't evaporate just because Braxton was gone. I saw it in meetings where people would start to raise an issue, then stop themselves and say, "Never mind." I saw it in the way workers would glance nervously at supervisors before asking questions. I saw it in the suggestion box that had been installed years ago, but sat empty month after month, because people had learned their suggestions would be ignored or, worse, used against them. Changing that required modeling the behavior I wanted to see. In my second week, during a large staff meeting, I was presenting the new safety protocols when a warehouse associate named Marcus— "No, wait, I can't use that name. Let me restart." In my second week, during a large staff meeting, I was presenting the new safety protocols when a warehouse associate named Thomas Riley raised his hand. "Yes, Thomas." He hesitated, glancing at the people around him. I have a question about the new cold chain procedures, but it might be a stupid question." "There are no stupid questions about safety, Thomas. What's your concern? The procedure says we're supposed to do temperature checks every 2 hours for refrigerated storage. But what if we're in the middle of a major loading operation? Do we stop everything to do the check, or do we wait until there's a break in the work? It was actually a great question. The kind of real-world scenario that procedures written in offices sometimes don't account for. That's not a stupid question at all. That's exactly the kind of practical implementation issue we need to address. I turned to Holly. Let's add a clarification to the procedure. Temperature checks take priority over loading operations. If a check is due during active loading, the checker has authority to pause operations for the 5 minutes needed to complete the check properly. And we'll schedule shifts to ensure there's always coverage, so one person doing checks doesn't create a bottleneck. Thomas looked genuinely surprised that his question had been taken seriously and led to an actual policy clarification. But the real impact wasn't on Thomas. It was on everyone else in that room who saw that raising a concern led to problem-solving rather than punishment. 3 days later, the suggestion box had 12 submissions. By the end of the month, we were getting 20 to 30 suggestions per week, some brilliant, some impractical, all of them signs of a workforce that was re-engaging with their workplace. The financial recovery took longer. Losing the Cardinal contract had been a massive blow, not just the revenue, but the prestige and the potential for additional pharmaceutical contracts. Margaret Ashford had been blunt in her assessment. The Philadelphia facility needed to prove it could operate reliably and safely, or it would be closed and operations consolidated to other locations. I had 6 months to turn around performance metrics, while simultaneously implementing new safety protocols that would, in the short term, slow operations and increase costs. It was the same impossible math Braxton had been handed, but with one crucial difference. I had leadership that understood the difference between efficiency and corner cutting. When I presented my operational plan to Margaret, I was honest about the timeline and costs. We're going to see a temporary dip in productivity, probably 8 to 10%, for the first 2 months while we retrain staff and implement proper procedures. Equipment costs will increase by 15% because we're restoring preventive maintenance instead of running everything until it breaks. Our cost per package will rise by about 12% in the short term. I expected pushback. Instead, Margaret asked, and after those first 2 months? After 2 months, productivity should return to previous levels but sustainable. After 4 months, we should start seeing improvements because we'll have less downtime from equipment failures and fewer injuries causing staffing shortages. After 6 months, I project we'll exceed previous productivity by 10 to 15% with better safety metrics and higher worker retention. And if you're wrong? If I'm wrong, you fire me, but this time with actual cause instead of retaliation for following safety law. The corner of Margaret's mouth twitched. Fair enough, approved, show me results. The results came, but not easily. Month 1 was brutal. Productivity dipped by 11%. We had 2 major equipment failures despite increased maintenance. 3 workers quit because they'd already lined up other jobs during the Braxton chaos and weren't willing to wait and see if things improved. I spent half my time on the warehouse floor, working alongside staff, demonstrating that management wasn't just making demands from glass offices. The other half I spent in meetings with corporate, defending every decision and explaining why short-term pain would lead to long-term gain. Month 2 showed the first green shoots of improvement. Productivity was down only 4%. Equipment failures dropped by 60% because the preventive maintenance was catching problems early. We hired 8 new workers and actually had people applying, because word was spreading that Zenith Philadelphia was under new management. Month 3, we broke even with previous productivity levels. Month 4, we exceeded them. By month 6, the Philadelphia facility had the best safety record in the entire Zenith system, the highest worker retention rate, and productivity that was running 18% above pre-Braxton levels. We also landed a new contract, not as large as Cardinal, but with a regional medical equipment distributor who specifically chose Zenith because they'd heard about our improved safety culture. In the meeting where Margaret Ashford reviewed our 6-month results, she looked at me across the conference table and said something I'll never forget. "You proved that doing things right and doing them profitably aren't mutually exclusive. That shouldn't be a revolutionary concept, but in this industry, it apparently is. Well done." Stories like mine aren't unique. They play out in workplaces across the country every single day. Workers pushed beyond reasonable limits, managers who measure success in metrics that ignore human cost, and systems that reward short-term gains over sustainable practices. But sometimes, someone pushes back. Sometimes, standing your ground leads to real change. If that's a message worth spreading, subscribing means these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. That number climbing towards 7,000 subscribers represents a community of people who believe workplaces can and should be better. 3 years after my termination and reinstatement, I'm still at Zenith. The Philadelphia facility is now used as a training model for new managers across the company. The policies we implemented have been adopted system-wide. Worker retention across all Zenith facilities has improved by 23%. Braxton Sheffield never worked in logistics again. The industry isn't large, and word spreads fast about people who leave destruction in their wake. I still think about that night sometimes, standing on the loading dock after 16 hours, exhausted beyond measure, being called a waste of money by a man who measured human value in productivity metrics. He wasn't entirely wrong. I was a waste of money to someone like him, money that could have been squeezed from workers pushed beyond their limits, from safety protocols ignored, from equipment run into the ground. But to a company that actually valued sustainability over quarterly reports, that understood workers weren't disposable resources, that recognized safety and productivity could coexist. To that company, I was an investment that paid dividends. The difference wasn't me. It was leadership willing to see past the next earnings call. That's the real story here. Not my individual triumph, but proof that better leadership creates better outcomes. That workers aren't obstacles to efficiency, they're the foundation of it. That the choice between doing things safely and doing things profitably is a false choice created by people who don't understand how actual operations work. I drive past that converted textile mill every day. The red brick, the updated signage, the parking lot full of workers' cars. And every day, I remember what it cost to fight for what that building represents now. A workplace that values people, that operates sustainably, that proves you don't have to destroy workers to succeed. Some battles are worth fighting, even when you might lose everything. Especially then. Because sometimes, the system does bend toward justice. You just have to be willing to push.